Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. Xeraxo6457 Alreval, this happened to me recently and I don't think I can work in a drive-thru again. I just moved out and got a job at Burger King. I always worked the night shift as it had less customers, hence less trouble. My apartment was a 5-minute walk from my workplace, so I had no issue getting home late overall. It was an ideal job for me to begin with. At least that's what I thought it was, a boring Monday night. And I was sitting by the counter watching YouTube videos when I heard a car pull into the drive-thru. I quickly put my phone aside and waited for the customer to drive up as soon as the car approached the window. I said in a fake, joyful voice, "Welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?" "Yeah, we're hungry." I saw a man wearing a vibrant colored Hawaiian t-shirt sitting in the driver's seat. He had a disturbing stare, but that's not the only thing that was weird about him. He had a skeleton dressed up as a woman in his passenger seat. I couldn't decide whether it was creepy or funny, but I took the high road and let it slide. "May I take your order, sir?" "A Whopper for me, and what will you have, darling, now?" The situation took a creepy turn. The man kept talking to the skeleton as if it was a real woman. He was smiling and laughing and whispering into its ear, which it obviously didn't have. He went on with his insanity for another 5 minutes, and I still patiently waited, because that's what was expected of me in this job. "Okay, so a Whopper for me and she'll have a cheeseburger. Sure, sir." I handed him the order along with the receipt and he paid in cash, seeing his behavior. I could tell he thought the skeleton was a real person. He slowly drove away and I sat by the window like a statue. For at least half an hour it took me some time to digest what just happened tonight. After that night, this man became a regular customer. Almost every other night he came to our store dressed in the same manner with the skeleton girlfriend and ordered the same food. At some point I too got used to it. I'm the person who loves minding her own business, so I never bothered to ask. I just did my job. And he went on his way one night. It was raining heavily and I was waiting for my shift and so that I could go home suddenly. I saw the man pulling into the drive-thru. He ordered the usual and started talking to his skeleton girlfriend. Meanwhile, I found out that we were running short on cheese, so it won't be possible to make a cheeseburger for his skeleton girlfriend tonight. Sir, I apologize, but we are running a little short on cheese. Can we substitute it with something else? Oh no. But Jenny loves cheese. This is her favorite. I understand that. But as I said, we are short on cheese. The triple Whopper is the same price. How about that? But Jenny doesn't want that. She wants her usual cheeseburger. I was being polite to this freak the whole time. But when he screamed at me, I lost my calm. "Well, why don't you take Jenny where she belongs, like a graveyard?" The man widened his eyes and stared at me with an intense gaze. I expected him to be angry at this point, but surprisingly he didn't get angry. Instead, a creepy grin appeared on his face. "Oh, I can see what's going on here. You're jealous, Jenny." "She is jealous, isn't that sweet? She's crushing on you." "Bae, what the hell? Look, you freak. That is nothing but a skeleton and no one is crushing on you. The truth is, you can't even get a real girlfriend. Maybe that's why you're putting on this freak show." As soon as I said that, I saw the color of his face change. He didn't say a single word and drove away silently. A week passed by and he was nowhere to be seen. Even though I felt bad for being rude to a customer, he did get on my nerves at night. Hence he gave me no choice, but after some time he showed up again. This time he didn't have the skeleton in his car. He came alone. I wanted to stay away from any kind of trouble, so I behaved professionally. "Your order, sir." "A Whopper for me." I delivered him the food and he handed me the money. I thought, thank God it's over. But things took a turn as he took a U-turn and parked his car right across the street. He then sat on the hood of his car and started eating his burger while staring directly at me. The mayo was dripping from one side and the ketchup was all over his mouth like blood. He was licking the mayo off his hand without breaking eye contact with me. He ate the entire burger like this and then drove away. I mean, I can't explain this obscene behavior, but all I can say is that night after going home, I took a long bath. I've never felt this disgusted ever in my life. The next day I informed my boss about this man because this was getting too much for me to take. He told me to call 911 immediately if I see him again. He also informed the other day shift workers about this guy. Everyone was on the lookout for him to come and get arrested by the cops for charges of harassment. But again, he didn't show up for weeks, even though everyone told me this man was just a crazy freak and that he's gone. I knew he would come again, and he didn't prove me wrong. It was around midnight. I was packing my stuff to leave early. That day, I already informed my boss about this when suddenly I heard car tires creaking in the near distance. It took me a fraction of a second to recognize the car. It was him. The odd customer. I dialed 911 right away and waited for him to approach me. As soon as he stopped near the window, I noticed something different this time. A girl was sitting next to him, and by a girl, I mean an actual person. I could tell she was heavily drunk. I could smell the strong odor of alcohol coming from her clothes. She was completely passed out in the passenger seat, and a terrifying feeling grabbed my heart. I knew this man must have lured her into his trap, because there's no way a sensible person would ever agree to hang out with this freak. He gave me a death-cold stare and smiled in the scariest way possible. That's my girlfriend, and she is real. I can prove that to you before I could act on this matter. He took out a wrench from the car's glove compartment and stared at me one last time. See for yourself, here we go. He then started to bludgeon the girls ruthlessly. She's real. She's real. She's real. He kept screaming like a psycho while smashing her face with the wrench. Her body started to tremble like roadkill. But due to her stage of intoxication, she couldn't get the chance to scream once I froze at the window. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of my eyes. The man kept beating her even after her brains came out gushing with blood splattering everywhere. I told you she's real now. Do you believe me? Do you hull? I heard the sirens of the cop cars nearby, but I couldn't bear the sight anymore. I collapsed on the ground, screaming out loud. 2 days later, I woke up in the hospital. My boss came to see me. He told me that the cops caught the man red-handed. There's no question he's guilty of first-degree murder. The girl he murdered that night went to the local pub. He probably picked her up once she passed out and brought her to the drive-thru. The cops are making sure that this psycho gets what he deserves. I don't think I'll ever be able to erase that night from my mind. Is it my fault that the girl lost her life? Did I provoke the creep to do this? What do you think? Xonohawk 853DH Pari. I was a full-time employee at Burger King and had worked a monotonous 10-hour shift every day. The quality of my life wasn't the greatest, as the countless hours of work were starting to become more and more strenuous. I desperately needed money, as I wanted to move out of my grandfather's house and into a residence of my own. My grandfather took the responsibility of taking care of me since I was an infant. Due to the tragic loss of my parents, my mother and father had suffered a fatal car crash which granted my grandfather full custody of me. I began comprehending the news as I got older, but oddly enough wasn't too affected by it, as he fit the bill of being the best caretaker that a kid could ever ask for. Playing duck hunt was one of my favorite things to do whenever I wasn't so busy at work. My grandfather didn't own any consoles that you would usually see in today's modern day, just the old school Nintendo with the classic gun controller. Hey Grandpa, don't worry about me, son. Pay attention to the game and get that birdie. That's it, Larry. Now go on, shoot the birdie now. Besides entertaining Grandpa with my spectacular duck hunt skills, I was usually serving customers at the drive-thru of Burger King. I always switched back and forth from the kitchen to providing customer service at the front counter. Our location wasn't usually as busy as most Burger King branches, as we were located by the corner of a quiet residential area, and there weren't many teenagers or kids around, mostly just an older crowd that were either retired or just big fans of our adversary McDonald's. Working at Burger King for a long duration of my postgraduate time off made me familiarize with the regulars who would come to dine in. I was usually scheduled for the night shift, so the difference in crawl was pretty evident, as our venue always seemed to attract homeless people or loiterers around this time. Then there was this one guy who would always arrive around 9 p.m. every evening dressed as a Burger King mascot. It was pretty evident this guy was either some crazy lunatic or just a really huge Burger King fan who wanted to look the part. I always got a few laughs and giggles every time I saw him, as the mock-up of the Burger King mascot was pretty accurate, but at the same time outlandish, as impressive as his getup was. I was more intrigued by the absurd orders he usually requested. I remember him approaching the front counter as I said, "Hi sir, welcome to Burger King, may I take your order?" The mascot then said, "Give me 30 Whoppers, sir. Are you sure you want 30 Whoppers?" I said, "30 Whoppers make Whoppers now." "Okay, sir, just the sandwiches, or would you like to make it a combo? Have it your way." The mascot then placed about 150 on the counter and began walking towards the seating area. I recall him sitting in one of the booths as the employees in the back began preparing the 30 Whoppers. About 10 minutes later, I bring the stack of Whoppers on a tray towards the mascot's table and notice he had his cell phone held up by a salt shaker with the video camera recording. I placed the tray down and casually walked back behind the front counter. I then saw the mascot completely demolish the Whoppers one by one. It appeared he was either filming a mukbang or just had a preposterous craving for Whoppers. I recall seeing the mascot eat a total of around 10 Whoppers out of the bunch and then pass out from the inevitable itis while drooling on the furniture. The time was around 12 a.m., which was when our restaurant closed for in-dining service. And also when it was the end of my shift, I knew in the back of my head that I had to politely escort the man out. So I slowly approach him. As I see him snoring heavily, I gently tap his shoulder and say, "Hello, sir, I unfortunately need to ask you to leave as we're closing me. Whopper, give me Whopper, make me Whopper." "Then I leave, sir." "We can't do that. You need to leave now." I firmly secure my stance with an assertive poker face while trying not to show any signs that I was nervous as hell. The mascot then gets up and walks out of the restaurant. Calling an Uber was completely necessary, as I wanted to avoid potentially being seen by that weirdo on the street or public transit. The time was roughly 1 a.m. when I made it home and immediately got in the shower. My paranoia began setting in as all I could hear was weird noises coming from outside my shower curtain. "Grandpa, is that you?" That's when I heard the same Burger King mascot voice from earlier saying, "Open the door. What the hell? How'd you get inside my house? Open the door, open the door, open the door. Get the hell out of here, fine. Have it your way." That's when the man grabbed a hold of the door hinges and repeatedly slammed his head against the door. "Get the hell out of my house, so I'm calling the cops," as the mascot continued slamming his head. I remembered my grandpa secretly keeping one of his handguns stashed in the bathroom cabinets. I took it out and pointed it towards the door as I said, Please don't make me do this. Please just go. I have a lot to live for." Here's Johnny the mascot successfully plummets his head through the door. Just then I see my grandpa standing next to me. I shout, "Grandpa, help me. That's it, Larry. Now go on, shoot the birdie." Now I pulled the trigger and said, "Look, Grandpa, I did it. I killed the birdie. Aren't you proud of your grandson? I still got it, don't I?" Wow. It was late spring around the month of May when I landed a full-time position at my local Burger King. The Burger King was about a 15-minute walk from my apartment complex, so getting there wasn't so dreadful of a commute compared to my previous locations of employment. Like I said before, I was a recent hiree, so I was at the stage of getting used to the workplace. The job consisted of tasks such as making food at a fast rate, doing the usual customer service at the drive-through window and front counter, and of course the everyday maintenance work around the restaurant to help keep the cleanliness at a reasonable standard. I personally found everything about the job fine, except for the night shifts that my boss would occasionally schedule for me. I unfortunately had to take every shift handed to me, as I was the newbie of the workplace who didn't have the same seniority that the other staff had. I would usually work alongside my coworker Jeff, who was also a new hiree, and happened to be around the same age group as myself. We got along pretty well as he was a humorous, witty kind of guy who would often crack jokes and do silly pranks just to make the lengthy shifts go by. Well, at least with the exception of this older gentleman named Bob. Our boss usually scheduled Bob to work with us during the weekends, including Fridays, as we tend to garner more customers around that time. I honestly felt uncomfortable every time Bob was around, as he always gave me an unsettling smirk and would flirtatiously wink at me whenever Jeff or myself would make eye contact with him. I was honestly convinced he had a thing for young males such as myself, so I did my best to stay professional and be cordial during our work shifts. I remember during one of the day shifts I went to go use the urinal in the men's washroom, only to see it being occupied by none other than Bob. Our washroom was quite small and only consisted of one toilet and one urinal stall. So there was a high probability that you were bound to wait till someone was done doing their business. What made things worse was how this was the only men's washroom in the facility. So that meant that it was what our employees used alongside the hordes of customers that came in And now to the restaurant, looking at the toilet from a distance always made me want to puke, as the toilet seat was usually covered with disgusting fluids, and more often than not was rarely flushed by the last person. Doing a number 2, I personally despised using the washroom here. It only came here strictly for the urinal and nothing else. As I waited for Bob to finish his business, I could recall him looking back at me while simultaneously peeing. I casually drifted my eyes away from him and pretended that I was checking myself out in the mirror by the sink. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became extremely unpleasant and awkward. As much as I avoided making eye contact with this weirdo, I could feel his eyeballs latching onto me like he was giving me some kind of death stare from hell. I remained composed and continued to keep my eyes glued to the mirror through my peripheral vision. I could still make out that he was looking at me, except he was now sticking his tongue out while licking the bottom of his lips as if my appearance made him parched. I remember contemplating whether I should just wait outside, or if I should just wait a couple more seconds for him to finish peeing. A million thoughts began to scramble inside my head, saying, "Why the hell does he keep looking at me, and who the hell pees for this long time?" Began running slow as each second passed by, when I began to realize that I couldn't hear him peeing at all. All I could hear was the ambient noise coming from the customers of the dining area, and my throbbing a heartbeat beginning to slowly intensify. The longer I stood in the washroom, I then slowly shifted my eyes directly at Bob and said, "Hey, are you done using the urinal? Does it look like I'm done, kid? I'm still standing here, aren't I? Dude, I need to pee. Do you mind hurrying up?" "Why would I hurry up? I'm just getting started, if you know what I mean." "And I think you do." That's when I repulsively looked at Bob in a vile manner and proceeded to use the available toilet stall to do my business. I remember doing a number 1 while closing my eyes and holding my breath in, as I didn't want to see what feces or fecal matter lied within the toilet. After I was done, I used the tip of my shoe to flush the toilet and proceeded to wash my hands when I see Bob, now occupying the sink again. I stood there waiting for him as I can see him glancing towards my direction while washing his hands, saying, "Hey, the urinal's all yours, kid," and then disturbingly winks at me. I could now tell that he was intentionally taunting me and was trying to fish for a reaction for the sake of his sick pleasure. I don't need it anymore. I just need to wash my hands. Now you want to wash your hands? Well, you're going to have to wait, beautiful, unless you want to share the sink with me. I'll just wait outside until you feel, "Oh no, you're not. You wouldn't want to serve Whoppers with those dirty hands now. Just wait. A couple more seconds for me to wash my wrinkly old hands, then you can wash yours after." "Okay, beautiful, stop calling me that. What the hell are you two yelling at? Get in the kitchen and make some Whoppers, we're behind on orders." Bob turned off the faucet and proceeded to exit past my boss while saying under his breath, "I was just washing my hands and the little boy yelled at me because he got too impatient." I then began to wash my hands as my boss casually approached me and whispers, "Hey, Crust, don't mind Bob, he's been working here for a while and can be a little weird sometimes. I hope everything's okay." "Yeah, everything's fine. He definitely is something else. Don't worry, kiddo. I do plan to have him do some other work besides the kitchen soon, thanks, boss. I hope that can happen sooner rather than later." Several days after this incident, I remembered watching TV in my living room just before leaving my house for work, except this time I was scheduled for a night shift. The time was approximately 9 p.m. when I left my house and began to walk towards the Burger King. As I approached the front of the building, I could see a Burger King mascot standing outside of it while waving his arms back and forth like he was attempting to attract more customers. I found this quite bizarre, considering I wasn't expecting to see such a thing when entering work. I remembered approaching the front door as the mascot intentionally blocked my entry. Do you work here?" The mascot just stood there in silence while hellaciously gawking at me with the devious Burger King mask, as if he was expecting to get a reaction out of me. I honestly felt oblivious about the whole ordeal, so I decided to head inside through the back entrance of the Burger King. As I got inside, I was greeted by my fellow coworker Jeff, who pulled me to the side and said, "Hey dude, you know who that BK mascot is, right?" No, who is it?" "It's Bob. The boss gave him the gig so he could potentially attract more customers, but from the looks of it, I think he's scaring everyone away. Well, at least he's not in the kitchen with us anymore." "Yeah, he should be heading home soon anyway. His shift is basically almost done." Thank God for that. About an hour into my shift, it was just me and my friend Jeff running the kitchen and drive-through orders. The indoor dining area was closed due to after hours, so we basically had the whole restaurant to ourselves. I could recall Jeff excusing himself to use the washroom, while I continued to watch YouTube videos on my cell phone while awaiting the next drive-through customer. I remember slightly drifting off to sleep when I see the same Burger King mascot make an appearance. "Bob, what the hell are you doing here?" I then noticed the mascot holding a large kitchen knife while slowly raising it in the air as if he was preparing to potentially stab me. I shouted, "Get the hell away from me, or I'm calling the cops. Help somebody, please help me." I contemplated on jumping out the drive-through window, but instead took a more sinister approach by grabbing the kitchen knife conveniently sitting next to the deep fryer. I raised the knife up with my trembling hand as if I was ready to fight for my life, the mascot, then raised the knife up in the air and began walking towards my direction as I began pleading for my life. As I said, "Bob, please stop. Please don't do this, I have a lot to live for." That's when the mascot miraculously slips on the ground from the lettuce scattered all over the ground as a knife he was holding slides out of reach. I then stood on top of the mascot and yelled, "This is why they call it Burger King foot." Lettuce, and again repeatedly stabbing through the chest area of the costume. It's just self-defense, he was trying to kill me first, there's no way in hell I'm going to jail today. "Kid, what the hell are you doing?" That's when I slid the Burger King mask off, who I thought was Bob, only to see my friend Jeff. It was just a prank. No, wow. I used to go to Burger King all the time. I'm a big guy and I like to eat, but I never learned to cook for myself. So I go through a lot of fast food drive-thrus, especially Burger King, since it used to be the only place on my way home from work that was open 24/7. But the last time I went to Burger King, I had a very disturbing experience. I pulled my truck up to the intercom at a little past 2 in the morning, as per usual. But strangely, even after a few minutes, nobody had asked me for my order. Hello, anybody there? Sometimes they don't realize somebody's waiting in line until I say something, but even after I hollered them, they still weren't saying anything. "Hey, you in there, I'm trying to place an order." I usually wouldn't use that type of tone with employees, but I was very hungry and cranky and I didn't want to have to go across town to McDonald's just to get something to eat. "Come on, guys, your lights are still on, the sign says 24/7. I know you're in there, don't make me pull up around the corner," and there I was, still left hanging with no response. "All right. Fine, I'm coming up to the window." After I couldn't reach through the intercom, I pulled up to the window hoping to give them a piece of my mind. I was thinking they were either sleeping on the job or ignoring me, and I took offense to either one. But when I pulled up to the window, I didn't see anybody inside. All the lights were still on though, so I knew they were open. I sat there and stared through the window for several minutes trying to catch a glimpse of someone. However, as it started to get closer to 2:30 in the morning, I realized I could have gone to McDonald's and eaten already, and I was just about to give up. But at the last second, I heard people talking from inside. Suddenly, I was pissed off all over again. "Hey, bozo, off your lazy butt to take my order and clean the wax out of your ears while you're at it." I even knocked on the window too, but it looked like the only thing that I'd accomplished was making the people inside go quiet. It was starting to look like a lost cause. I should just drive away from out of nowhere. The cashier's face slams into the window. He was drenched and sweat with bloodshot eyes and his hands pressed against the glass so bad that I was at a loss for words. The poor guy slowly opened the window. I could see how much his hands were shaped. "Good evening, sir. How may I take your order? I'll just have a Whopper." "Thank you, will that be all today, sir?" "Yes, please, just the Whopper and I'll be on my way." The cashier paused for a moment, and I saw him clench his jaw like he was holding back something he wanted to say. I stared him down and waited for him to spit it out. "You sure you wouldn't like anything else? You have lots of other food items on the menu, sides, sauces, desserts, breakfast, biscuits. And thank you, man." I said I just wanted a Whopper, and that's it. "But Sarah, I insist, and I insist that you shut up and listen to me. Just place my order, take my money, and give me my food." I felt bad for yelling at him again, but I was done with playing whatever his game was. His whole body was trembling by then. He was sweating like a pig. But finally he nodded and punched it in. "No problem, sir. It's just the Whopper sandwich and that'll be $1,000. What student think I'm an idiot? I know how much a Whopper costs and it ain't $1,000. Matter of fact, you ought to be paying me for wasting my time." Do you even know how long I've been out here waiting for you? 30 minutes, and all I want is one Whopper. So stop playing games and do your job. My apologies, sir. It must be the machine. It's very old. It must be broken. I'm working the whole restaurant by myself tonight, so I haven't had time to fix it, blah, blah, blah. Quit whining, your job isn't that hard. Oh, but it is, you see, I was thinking, if you could just give me a tip and hash. What a tip, just $1,000 cash for holding down the business. I couldn't believe what I was so pissed off again that I'd gone far past the point of yelling and screaming and reached a boiling point where I was tempted to just punch the scheming dirtbags. Lights out. Listen here, buddy, I'm this close to just leaving, but honestly, I'm closer to giving you a knuckle sandwich. Ever heard of a sandwich before? It's what I've been trying to get from you this whole time. I know your machine is working just fine. You're the problem, you lazy, entitled, slimy little snot-nosed brat. Suddenly, the cashier did something bizarre. He now had his hands clashed together and was hanging out the window and pleading with me. Please, please, sir, just give me the money, I need it. You don't understand, please, you have to give it to me, you have to screw off. I pushed him back and started to drive off. But then, to my surprise, the scrawny little twerk lunged forward and grabbed me by the collar. I stopped so I wouldn't accidentally kill him with my truck, and that's when he got even more desperate. Please do not understand, just give me the money, please. There was sadness and fear in his eyes which made me hold back from hitting him. He was crying as he screamed at me. He froze after a few seconds, so I grabbed him by the collar and set him back a few inches. Get off, you're barking up the wrong tree. But then I was completely taking it back when he whispered, please call the cops. What? Unfortunately, he didn't have time to explain. Somebody appeared behind him and yanked him back. Then some deranged creep was staring me down, and it was obvious they were not an employee of Burger King. In a second, he charged for and he tried to grab me. But I sped off just in time and raced home. I was so confused and disturbed that I had lost all my appetite, and I called it a night and went straight to bed. The next one, I flipped the TV onto the local news, and when I saw, made my heart sink. The same Burger King I was at was reportedly robbed, and that poor worker's face was plastered on the broadcast as the face of the victim. He was allegedly held at gunpoint and didn't end up surviving the ordeal. To this day, I still beat myself up about it. Maybe I could have saved him. If I had known there was a human life on the line, things would have been different. They can't even think about eating a Burger King ever again. On November 18th, a man entered a Burger King demanding free food. The employees reportedly refused his demand. Things only escalated from there, which prompted an employee to think quickly on their feet. They alerted a customer in the drive-thru to call 911 during the robbery. I'm a regular customer at Burger King, always enjoying what they have to offer in their menu. Since the food quality had never ceased to amaze me, I had become loyal to this fast food restaurant for many years. Fortunately, one of the branches was situated near my home, making it a 10-minute walk and convenient to get my Burger King fixed. I didn't care if my diet revolved around Burger King. And although I enjoyed their Whoppers, it was their chicken tender crisp sandwich that won me over. I was free to eat as much as I could from Burger King since my husband was rarely home to cook a nice homemade meal. But I never complained, as I wasn't the best cook myself. In fact, I've always admired his hard work, and with him being away most of the time, I could get away with my obsession from Burger King since no one was around to reprimand me. So it was a window of opportunity I couldn't refuse. I would always tell myself that going for a walk as I headed to Burger King was the best way to burn off calories, but deep down I knew it was pointless, as I would quickly get them back from eating BK all over again. But little did I know at the time that things would drastically change. I was familiar with all the employees working for the Burger King branch near my place, so if a new guy came along, I'd know instantly, not that there was anything wrong with it, but I felt shivers running down my spine as I glanced at the creep smiling at me as he stared. Then, when I looked across the counter, I was distraught to see that most of their former staff had been replaced. Nonetheless, a change of staff wasn't enough to push me away. I ordered the usual from the creep. Despite my reluctance, and even when I tried to avoid negative thoughts, he rubbed me the wrong way. I said, unable to look him in the eyes, keeping myself fixated on his name tag. Then I gave my order. Well, Ryan, I'll have a chicken tender crisp to go. Please, to go. Are you sure? He replied, yes, to go. I said to go sit at the table. I didn't know if this weirdo was intentionally joking or not, but he was definitely making me feel uncomfortable, so I told him, "I'm sorry, but I'll be taking it home. Thanks. There's no place like home. Like Burger King," he said. As he blankly started staring towards my chest, I then placed a few crumpled up bills on the counter and waited elsewhere. A few minutes later, he handed over my order and I immediately got the hell out of there for a week or two. I couldn't stop. The urge to order my favorite sandwich from Burger King, and unfortunately all the other branches were miles away a bit too troublesome for me to visit, so even if I had to see that creep repeatedly, it was something I could endure as long as I had a bite of that tasty sandwich. Then as the weeks passed, I began experiencing stomach pains that were a bit more severe than the ones I had encountered before. However, I was incredibly stubborn. My husband tried talking me out of it, but I still didn't listen. I kept trying to find other scapegoats to avoid putting the blame on Burger King, but the pain in my stomach only worsened. Then that's when a thought came to mind. Suddenly, images of that creep appeared in my head, reminding me of how he was hitting on me the other time, so I suspected that this particular employee was behind this. He must have done something to my sandwich, taking a toll on my health. I was so mad that I told my husband about the creep. Initially, I didn't want him to know, afraid I would forever be banned from buying my favorite meal. But then I urged him to accompany me to the restaurant to meet the manager and complain about the creep. However, my husband shook his head, telling me it wouldn't be. Why, since I didn't have any evidence to prove my statement. So one night my husband and I decided to do a little investigation of our own. We both dropped by the Burger King, where I had ordered the same sandwich with the creep surfing it to me. "Hi, I'll have a chicken tender crisp to go, please." He snickered and said, "What the hell happened to your radiant glow? You seem rather sluggish and pale today." I ignored him, giving him the payment and putting my sandwich in the bag. Then I sat beside my husband in the restaurant, took out the sandwich and began inspecting it. Then suddenly my partner's eyes grew wide as he said, "What the hell is this? It seems like something was moving across the meat." I rubbed my eyes in disbelief, thinking we were imagining things, but we weren't. Upon taking a closer look, we could see about a dozen slugs in it. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to throw up. All this time knowing that I was consuming slugs made me start to act irrational. My husband tried calming me down, but even he couldn't control himself any longer. That's when he went into a fit of rage and started trashing the restaurant, tossing garbage cans and emptying the straw dispensary all over the place. Then he went to the counter and grabbed the creep by his collar, saying, "How dare you put flux in my wife's sandwich, you piece of..." The creep then started to act oblivious to what was going on, saying, "Sir, I have no idea what you're talking about." I can tell my husband became more irritated as the man replied without a tinge of remorse. I could tell my husband was itching to deck the guy in the face, but he was somehow able to retain himself. I remember seeing most of the other customers getting up to leave, having lost their appetite after hearing what my husband said to the creep. I then tried to reason out with the manager, but he ended up siding with the bastard employee and kicked us out for causing the public nuisance. Me and my husband were convinced the manager was either in on it or he was afraid of the damage this would cause to Burger King's reputation. So we had no choice but to report the incident to the authorities, where we handed them the slug-infested sin, which is our primary evidence. The cops promised to get back to us soon, but as the weeks passed, there was still no news about its progress. Since then, I hadn't heard about the creep or the slugs. This story was inspired by a story that happened at a Burger King branch at Preston Gate, Darlington. A young woman discovered a slug in her chicken tender crisp sandwich and accused the fast food restaurant of ignoring her complaint. A spokesperson has since stated that they have begun preliminary investigations on their food management procedures upon searching for a follow-up. It seems like the restaurant has permanently closed down. This story happened a few years ago when I worked at Burger King. I swear it's all true, and in any case, it's a vivid and traumatic memory that I must live with. But despite this, nobody ever seems to believe me. Of course, that won't stop me from sharing my experience. I was a college dropout, so I had to get the job at the dirty Burger King in town so I could make enough money to move out of my parents' house. I was full-time and usually got stuck with the short end of the stick. My boss made me work the graveyard shift since a particular franchise I worked at was a 24-hour location. I didn't mind though. The night was very relaxed compared to the day, The longer I worked there, the more I got used to seeing the same sparse crowd. Of regulars, it wasn't just the drive-thru that was always open, but the dining area too. There were usually a handful of students on their laptops, hopped up on the crappy coffee and studying feverishly throughout the night. Aside from them, there were 3 or 4 homeless guys that would pitch in their quarters on a cup of coffee, just so they could all have an excuse to chill and sock. And towards the end of my shift, I'd always see the same set of corporate businessmen stopping in for a bite to eat before going to work. Honestly, it was a decent job. However, that was only the case until one very different night after which my life has never been the same. It started off deader than usual. None of the regulars were showing face, and barely anybody had come through the drive-thru. Either I was the only person working that night. So this was all fine with me. My boss had intentionally put me on the schedule by myself, expecting correctly that there would be very little business to do. At around the midpoint of my shift, the whole place was empty, and I assumed I wouldn't get any customers for a couple hours, so I started to make myself busy by mopping the floor. I went into the kitchen to fill up the bucket, but when I came back out front, somebody was sitting in a window booth on the far side of the restaurant. They were dressed rather convincingly like the Burger King mascot, and had the same crown and cloak and facial hair and everything. The only problem with this costume was just how deranged and weather he looked. I casually rolled the bucket over near where he was sitting and started to mop in that area to get a closer look at him. I certainly didn't recognize them from anywhere but the Burger King commercials, but since he didn't have any food on his table yet, I was contractually obligated to talk to him. Good evening, sir. Could I help you with anything? I demand to be served. Well, sure, I can make you a Whopper, but you'll have to come up front and pay for it. The man then gave me a death glare. Fine having you away. He barked at me as I walked back to the counter. What do you think you're going? You're supposed to let the king walk ahead of you, peasant. Sure, go ahead. He then cut me off and walked up to the counter, waiting impatiently for the 3 seconds it took me to catch up. I punched in his order and told him the price. That'll be $6.49, sir. All I got for another tense moment was the same hateful look in his eyes, until he reached into the donation jar on the counter and pulled out a random fistful of change and threw it. Keep the change and never ask me to pay for anything in my own establishment ever again. Finally, he turned around and went back to a scene. I contemplated calling the cops on him for essentially stealing money from needy children. But then I thought I could take matters into my own hands and get back at him for emasculating me over a couple of dollars. I retreated into the kitchen to make his Whopper, and I made it with a special ingredient. I got out the lettuce and set it on the floor, then stepped on, jumping up and down a few times while cracking myself up by saying the old line number 15. Burger King foot lettuce once. I was done entertaining myself. I constructed, did the sandwich, and brought it out to the needy Burger King. Here's your Whopper, sir. Have a good night. I started to walk away, only for him to snap his fingers at me. Yeah, Darren. Can I help you, sir? Do. You really expect me to eat this by myself? A king must never eat his food with his own hands. You must feed it to me. You idiot, I'm sorry, sir, but that's against our store policies. At least I think it is. I am the king of this joint. I make the rules. So get over here and fulfill your duty before I shove this Whopper up your mom's. What, suddenly I was a little scared. I wanted to avoid escalating the conflict with this Burger King guy. So I gave in and decided to feed him like he wanted, hoping he would go away if I did what he wanted on the positive side. It had the added bonus of ensuring he ate the special recipe I made for him. I was nervous, though my hands were shaking as they reached down and picked up the Whopper, then gradually brought it up to his mouth. Open wide, I guess. And that's one of the most horrific memory-haunting things I've ever seen happen. The Burger King's mouth jerked open and stretched inhumanely. And that's when it happened. He wants it, clamping his teeth down on my wrist and devouring the sandwich in my entire hand in a single bite. I screamed in pain and tried to break free, but his jaw's grip was on me like the alligators started thrashing around. He pulled on my arm and failed me back and forth, repeatedly slamming me down on the table. Leave me alone. I'm going to cops. Somebody get this guy off of me. Stop it. I woke up from a coma in a hospital. The first thing I did when I came to was look down to my right hand, only to see a lot of bandages, but no right hand. As soon as I could speak, I tried to tell my parents what happened to me, but when I did, they just looked at me like I was crazy. They tried to tell me some BS story about an alligator that snuck out of the lake behind the restaurant and ambushed me when I took out the trash, but I knew that couldn't be true. The funny thing is, I was fired from Burger King and barred from ever entering it again, as though it were all my fault. I'm not even allowed to see the security footage of what happened. I think the BK Corporation put a gag order on my parents and told them to lie to me. The only reason I can think that they would do such a thing is if the Burger King himself was more than an urban legend, but an actual, real person, if you can call him a person. Applause foreign number 15 Burger King foot.